What is this psychopath doing? For fuck's sake. When in doubt, don't get a black cat.
He's the best.
He is emotionally, draining.
You love him.
I do, because he's black, and I don't turn my back on black.
Oh my god.
And welcome.
5, 4, 3 all the way. Then we got to one finger salute. We have Caffeine Controversy, the podcast.
To another podcast of Caffeine Controversy. It is, of course, your boy, Mangina. Big Fluff, also known as Levi. That's the name my mama gave me. And then we have over here Mrs. Butt Cheeks, Vanilla Smoothie, Yamazon Prime, PGP. Cara, how are you doing today?
I'm good. The week's halfway over.
Yeah.
I'm good. Well, my week's halfway over.
Yeah, your week is. I work in retail, so I'm just getting freaking started.
Yeah. But my week is halfway over. Well, on the day that we're recording this, it's halfway over.
Yep.
And it's not too bad today.
Yeah. How in the world of the perimenopause are you doing today? So let's figure that out. In Cara's Coochie Corner.
Oh my god. Other than
Triple C's.
Other than being like boiling lava hot, I'm good.
Okay. No drama?
Not yet. The day's young.
How are you rating people on a hate scale?
I'd say 4 or 5. Like,
Wow. Okay, so that's good. That's good.
Yeah, not really angry, and I mean, earlier I was a little annoyed with them, but that's just typical.
Yep.
But no, I'm good now.
Okay.
It's not a day that it carried on after work.
Yeah, because you can let it go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I struggled with that for years. Like, I would take work home, and
I work from home.
yeah.
Work is home.
Yeah, that's sad. That is. I mean, it's sad and it's good at the same time. It's sad because of the fact that if you really want to get away, you kind of can't. Like, you go into your office and there you are. Like, for me, like, I've learned the drive home, because I work 45 minutes to an hour away from where we live, is like, that's my decompression time. And I've always kind of worked in that far away. I've never really worked close to home.
Yeah.
Even when I lived in Rhode Island, I was always like an hour away. But those are the things that help out the most, just like decompressing. And that's a struggle bus in itself, you know, because the world is stupid. The world is stupid. People are stupid. And you can't call people stupid right now, because it might be the S word sooner or later, because how easily people are offended. So, you know, speaking of NS word, we watched a documentary called Sky King.
Yes.
Which was really, really good. I actually got recommended it by my boss.
Yeah, it was better than I thought. Because when I first saw it come on, I'm like, why do I want to watch this? And then, because I don't remember it happening at the time.
Yeah, it was something that was hugely viral on the InstaWebs, like in 2018.
I don't know why I don't remember it.
You probably were going through some random breakup.
I'm probably.
Yeah. So, and like, you dip in and out of stuff. Like, I'm like, in terms of stuff like that, like, that's like that shock value crap. Like, I'm all into it.
Yes. Yeah, I know.
Like, I'm all into that, but the shock of like reality TV, I can't watch.
Yeah, see, I'm reality TV, trash TV, like pseudo celebrity stuff. Like, that's what I know. Mm-hmm. The like crashes, the broken bones, all of that. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, like that's never been in my algorithm until you. Yeah,
like action, like live action stuff of like people fighting and breaking bones, stuff like that. Then that's primarily because like I can mentally deal with that as someone who played sports versus someone who, those awkward moments, the reason why I can't deal with them is because it literally brings me back to childhood and watching my parents fight. So like I can't like deal with that, and I would just like tap out and I instantly would just walk away. So for me, I would turn off and just go upstairs and play video games or some shit like that. Where that I can't really do now, so I'll just like walk away. But like something like Sky King, I like that doesn't matter. Like I can watch.
Yeah, you actually put your phone down.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's big because you normally need to like multitask to like be able to focus and get stuff. So when I saw you put your phone down, I was like, oh.
Yeah, and it's partly because like I was just so into it. But Sky King is about a man, 29-year-old who hijacks a plane, and it's in terms of hijack, you have to use that type of term, just because he did steal a plane.
Yeah.
But he realistically just had a really bad mental health day. Concurrent bad mental health days,
and he worked at the airport.
So it wasn't like the airport guy was like slacking or TSA was slacking. It's like dude literally worked there, had clearance, and just walked onto the plane, and then just decided to say, hey, you know what, let's do what we do. But what were your thoughts on it?
So my two like takeaways that I noticed fairly quickly was both the Bebo guy and the air traffic controller were very calm and respectful to each other the whole time.
Yeah.
Because it was a situation that could have, I mean, it ended tragically, but it could have gotten very toxic for a lot of people very quickly if one wrong phrase or word was said.
Yeah.
Either way, really.
Yeah.
And they were both like...
It was a masterclass on de-escalation.
Yes.
It really was.
And it also shows how sometimes that mental break isn't the completely... I mean, yes, stealing a plane is off the rails, but it wasn't like... He wasn't acting super insane. He just...
No.
I wanted to fly. I'm going to take the plane and do a joyride before
I'm ready to punch my clock.
Yeah. And
it really was, and that's really what it was, because he was talking to everybody so calmly, so respectfully, like, and then you could tell he had an anxiety attack about what he was doing, because when he talked on the plane, like he said, like he threw up. And that could also be like the vortex, and like, I don't know what the proper term is, but like when you're flying, that whole pull thing, right?
Yeah.
And it's an adrenaline rush and all those things. But the air traffic controller really had a masterclass on de-escalation, because he made sure that the casualties or casualty was going to be at a minimal. And he kept trying and trying and trying. And
you'll be a hero if you land this.
Yeah.
Come back. Let's land this. Like, he really tried
and then
he kept the fighter jets back, because a lot of other situations
they would have shot him down.
Yeah.
And it was one of those, it was cool to watch that, because as somebody who's in human resource, it truly was a masterclass in like de-escalation. But it was one of those things where it's like, it just shows to me how bad and fractured mental health is for a lot of people. And also, people were like, in that whole thing, it turned into a society, a social economical thing of like why he did it, because he wasn't getting a promotion based upon his status in life and like wealth status. And then they tried to go into race status, and it was just like, it took a lot of turns that I didn't feel needed to be taken.
Yeah. I think it also shows that, like, because I mean, this was what, 8 years ago?
Yeah.
Or whatever. So that it shows the level of like disrespect and not being paid properly at work, what it can do on somebody that is feeling the pressure of providing for a wife, a family, themselves, whatever.
Yeah.
That, like, this was the extreme he went to. I mean, you've talked in previous episodes, like, if I die, let me die at work, so my family's taken care of.
Yeah.
I can't imagine the escalation of that feeling now, 8 years later, with the state of everything and the cost of everything, and like wages aren't really, I mean, PA wages haven't gone up in years. Yeah,
this is the first time where we actually see there's a wage increase.
Yeah, but it hasn't even gone into effect yet.
Oh, it has.
It has?
May 1st. in terms of May 1st, is starting to bring people in at like $13.25, which that people are like, oh wow, I'm getting so much money, but they don't understand like the cost of living is going to increase by triple that percentage.
Yeah, I mean it already has gone up past that point. They just were making do, you know.
Yeah.
But I think it just shows that like there needs to be respect for people on all levels. Like you need, and I mean we know it. We've talked about this with work stuff. Like you got to respect your employees that are doing the grunt work.
Yeah.
Because if the grunt work isn't done, you're not making the high money.
No, and I totally agree. Like, look, I start every day with saying I thank you for what you do and thank you for what you will do, because look, at the end of the day, like there's you do not need caffeine, buddy. But there's very few times where you look at people and be like, wow, like you need to step it up, or you know, like I always say this as somebody who's a mental health ambassador, because like I've been messed up for years, and I'm a survivor of many attempts, by many, like 3. It's you don't know how far that rabbit hole goes where you just be like, I'm ready for today. Like I openly talk on like my Instagram, like when we were going for my mom one time to look at like caskets, because her health was failing, and she was like, why don't you jump in? And I would jump in, and she was like, oh, that fits because you're wide shoulder like me. And I was like, yeah. And then one time she would be like, well, I'm looking for you. That's why I had you jump in. And it's truly like you hear that and you see that and you say that, but then it's like, it's crazy to think like there's no safe space for men to talk about their mental health. And I don't care what anybody says. And people are going to be like, oh, there's a safe space now. No, there's not. You want to know why there's not? Because at the end of the day, you see these things on Instagram and on Snapchat on how like there's people that talk about, well, men have to do this, men have to do this. This is a woman's job. This is a men's job. There's still those stupid categories that you fit people in. And because of those categories, like there's no safe space for men. Like if you're out here crying online and people be like, oh wow, look at her strength for sure, her showing how like being so transparent. But if a man does that, he's called a bitch, or he's look at this soft ass. It is called by that by other men, right? Yeah. Because we still have to have this rah type of mentality, but there's no safe space for us within our own selves. It is no safe space for black men. None. To be fragile and be vulnerable. You can't do that in today's society. Yeah. Like what I was taught from my father, you cry in the shower alone like you're supposed to. And it's something that even from when my mom passed, I cried when I saw her. I cried at the funeral. And then that's pretty much been it. Like there's a couple one-offs here and there.
Yeah, you barely even cried when we first heard the news. I think you waited till I fell asleep. Mm-hmm. Because like I took a nap so I could drive us up to Rhode Island. Mm-hmm. It wasn't like I just was like, oh, your mom died, I'm going to take a sleep. You know? Yeah. It was planned out for a reason, but like it was the first initial kind of couple tears, and then it was like we planned what we were doing for the trip, and then I like forced myself to go to sleep, and I know you were up the whole time.
Yeah, I didn't sleep. But it was, and this is the thing, I feel. Because even in previous relationships where I've allowed myself, because you should be vulnerable with your partner, I allowed myself to be vulnerable and be like, I've had someone tell me like, I feel like I'm the man in the relationship because and that's what you get told, and that's how you get treated, and those are the stigmatisms that still exist, because the mental health for a man is like it's better to die on a sword than live like a bitch, and that's still taught, and it's taught mostly by women too. Because if you have this is going to be controversial, but I can give a shit. If you have someone that's a single parent and a single woman, guaranteed you're raising your son to be the man that you didn't get. Guaranteed. Because you want someone strong, willing, take care of the woman. But who takes care of him? Who takes care of his mental health? No one. He's supposed to just be like, all right, it's whatever. And that's how we're supposed to function. It's whatever. And it's not whatever. Like, we're fucked up too. And we should be allowed to be that way. Yeah. We don't even go to therapy. Like, I go to therapy, and I was the first man, I think, in my family to go to therapy that really used it. You know what I mean? And it's like, you do these things, and it's like, how, and you almost get looked at like, how dare you?
Yeah.
Like, you don't know the demons that I have to face every single day just to get up and go to work. And then to progress. Like, I tried 3 times. I tried when I was 13, when I was just sick and tired of like existing, especially after being SA'd as a child. Yeah. I tried when I was in my 20s, when I tried to forcibly OD. And then I tried in my 30s, where I just was, again, kind of like him. I just drove with my eyes closed and see what God take me. And those are the things where I was like, I literally would say to myself, if I die today, it'll be a good day. If I die today, it'll be a good day. Because that's the mental health that you're allowed to have as a man. If I die today, it'll be a good day. You want to know why? Because then I won't feel anything anymore. How many people feel that way? How many people think that way? And then you wonder why, with all the economical BS that we have to go through, that people do choose to do those things. And you know me, as someone who has a better health now, I don't like the whole, punching your own ticket. I actually speak out against it. But it was option 1. When I had my heart attack, I was pissed. I woke up because I was like, oh, finally. Because I suffered enough. Because it was easier for me to make a change. It was easier for me to punch out than to make a change. How many people have that now? Look at the generation that we're bringing up right now. These little bastards have the world at their fingertips. Yeah. And they don't even know how to deal with. They can't even do fractions or write their names in cursive, but they're supposed to know how to function as individuals with poor mental health and say, "Hey, your friend just clocked out. He was 16. Go to the funeral. It's open casket."
I mean, a lot of times, like, I don't know about a lot of times, but several times, you hear about it where they do it online and they're friends that have to see.
I had a girl that works with me,
yeah.
And she was, I won't say her name, but there was a situation, and it was traumatic, and it was literally like bullied online, and so he punched his ticket online on TikTok, on a live. Yeah. And to be the person that has to console someone like that, and I think that's kind of why, like, it's easy for me to make people laugh, and the same thing why a lot of us as millennials can make people laugh, is because life has been a joke. It has been a joke. It's the worst punchline known to man. Because it's just to set up the joke, and the punchline is when you're in the dirt with a slab on you. And that's how we view it. And the worst part is that we teach the next generation that. And like, the mental health aspect is, men don't have a safe space. They have opportunities for safe space, and I will say it's growing, but it's still not there.
Yeah.
There's
The one guy on Sky King even said, he was like, you don't talk to your friends about it.
No.
You don't check in with them
to
see how, like, hey, I had a bad day. Like, he's like, you don't even unload on your friends about normal day-to-day bullshit like women do.
Yeah.
But he's like, men don't really do that.
The only time I can honestly say, like, Nigel's been there for me, but even that, it's like, you know what we get as men? You good?
Yeah.
Nah. All right, well, let me know when you good or what you need.
But then you don't want to feel like a burden, so you never say what you need.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because now it's like, because then this is the thing. And this has happened to a lot of men too. When you're vulnerable with your woman, they throw it in your face. Happened to me. I was vulnerable with my woman, threw it in my face. No, not you. But like, it gets thrown in your face. Like, can't you be a man about it? Well, but then you get this. It's like, you don't ever talk to me.
Yeah. Or we wonder why men are out there, like, assaulting women.
Yeah, that's a stretch, but yeah.
But I mean, if you're not letting them get emotion out, I'm not saying it's right.
Yeah.
At all.
Yeah.
But if you are not letting them release emotion by talking,
Like,
some of them don't know how to do it any other way.
And I will say this, and this is something that also gets taught to men by women. And it sucks, but it's true, and it's going to be so controversial. Old school saying, if you step up like a man, expect to be treated like one. If you get all up in a man's face, he might do something to you. And it ain't right. If you step up, expect to be put down. It's those type of things where it's like, it's very hard for me to truly believe that men have a safe space. And I will never say that we 100% do. Because there is like, women will have congregation size meetups about how their mental health is. You know what men do? Go to Home Depot, go to Costco, meet up with the homies, and build some shit and drink some shit. And once alcohol gets involved, game over. Because what else are we going to do? How else are we going to talk? We ain't going to be good. But that's the sad status of mental health. There isn't any. There isn't. And in today's day and age, it's only just dwindling. So then you have mental health and emotional intelligence that is non-existent. You have actual intelligence that is non-existent. So now you're just being led by a bunch of stupid, angry people that have no idea how to get shit out. And that leads into a whole cavalcade of things. What's the dumbest thing you've heard this week? Oh, matter of fact, what's the dumbest statement you've ever heard? When I was in high school, in junior high school, I had a girl, I won't say her name, but it was in junior high school, Oliver Hazard Perry. And she yelled out to somebody, "Can you please shut up? I can't see."
When you're driving in the car and you turn down the radio to find where you're at better.
My one thing that I thought was the funniest thing in the terms of the Michael Jackson thing was my mom used to yell, "I'm gonna beat the black off of you," and then because like that was one of them that was one of them old school threats, like I'll beat the black off of you. And then when Michael Jackson started getting that vitiligo, she kept saying he got beat the black off of him, and I said, "Is that what happened to you? That's why you got freckles?" She slapped the hell out of me because my mama was light skinned with brown freckles, but man. Backhand strong on Peggy Ann.
There was a girl that worked for me about 6 years ago. We were technically like equal. Nice as can be. Just ditzy.
Yeah.
And we worked with numbers because it was like credit card shit.
Yeah.
And it wasn't something she said. It was how she wrote 120.
100?
No, it was like 120. But like it was. I can't even remember exactly. It was just the dumbest thing. And I like looked around to like everyone else. I'm like I'm not. And like there was a really young kid beside her. They might have been the same age, but he was like, and I was like, "Please tell me you know how to write this." I was like, "Write this for me." Like I was like, I came home and asked the kid, and the kid 6 years ago would have been like 12.
Yeah.
12. And he wrote it correctly. I was like, okay. It was just like, and she didn't get that, like, understand why it was wrong the way she did.
Yeah. Well, I actually had a conversation with somebody at work. I was ringing them out, and I was talking to them about balancing a checkbook. These kids have no idea how to balance a checkbook.
I mean, they don't even know what a checkbook is. Like, they don't know
No,
what
they've never seen
checks
one.
are.
They've never seen them.
Yeah.
I actually have to I'll never forget. One day I was helping a kid and showing her how to do something, and it was at the register, and she was like, "Levi, what is this? Do we take this?" And it was a check. I was like, "Yeah, we take checks." He's like, "But what is it?" It's a form of payment. She knew what a WIC check was, but not an actual check. So that lets me know mama has you young and you dumb. So we gonna figure this out. Okay. So I showed her what a check was. I told her the process and this, that, and the third. But yeah, they never know. And I think it's also like conditioned. Like we're all on our apps. Yeah. Like banking apps, Venmo, Cash App.
You see it instant.
Zelle, like it's instant. We're designatedly set up for instant gratification.
Yeah.
Which also leads to poor mental health, because if you don't get the instant gratification, it's like you literally see people, I'm just ready, you know?
Yeah.
Like how many people are like, one of the trending things that you see online is people driving behind like log trucks and say, I'm ready. I was behind one on the way home after dropping the boy off at, you know.
Destination.
Yeah, dude. Final Destination GOAT movie.
I mean, I remember we had a conversation with the boy and his best friend about like bouncing checks.
Yeah.
And they didn't realize like that saying was actually a thing.
Yeah.
And that like people would write a check because it took a couple days to process.
Yeah, and you had to
write it before the money was in your account.
Yeah.
And like,
this is the thing, is like depending on who cashed it and where they cashed it, because remember back in the day you had to call in for, if you worked in retail, which I've been in retail for most of my adult life, got me through high school, got me through college and all this other shit, but like you would have to call to verify the check, and then the check would be like, yeah, cash it. And then you would cash the check, you had to wait 3 to 5 business days. And then you would get notification through an email from the bank, check cleared or check bounced. And then if the check bounced, you put their picture on the freaking wall. Like, they don't even understand that whole thing, which led to a different thing that we heard last night, is that the child had no idea that you hand out senior pictures to the homies.
he was like, we just overheard him talking, and because he talks loud.
Yeah,
on the phone in the kitchen.
Well, it's a common thing with like, he plays video games loud because video games are life, because real life doesn't matter.
Yeah, but like he was like, yeah, he like gave me one of like the little picture wallet sized ones that like, he was like, what? And I'm like, did he just discover senior picture?
Yeah, you hand them out. You hand them out to the homies. Like back when I was growing up, you never wanted to, because you would get typecasted like, that's gay, you know, say some weird stuff like that and whatever. But like, you handed it like to the girls, bro. You handed it out to the girls. You know what I mean?
Everyone wanted my senior picture because it was the NSYNC one.
Yeah, because yours was the most. Because you look like them people that was on TV. My Strange Addiction. Because you had like an entire basement. This is where we can put that up. Yeah. You had an entire basement of like full on NSYNC stuff, and it was like, yeah. I mean,
I added that at the boy band.
Yeah.
Reel.
But like, we had so much stuff to keep us distracted from the fact that life was fucked up.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't.
But
the news wasn't at kids 24/7. Like,
after 9/11, it was.
Right. See, I was already out of high
I was 15.
School.
Yeah. So 15 for me, life changed.
I graduated the year before.
Yeah.
Because I'm old.
Older.
But like, the news wasn't 24/7 for me.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have cable until my senior year, so we didn't even have like a cable news channel that showed it all the time. We literally had just like 2, 4, 11,
yeah, or
whatever for like the channels.
We had cable that came with a black box.
But like, and I don't even really remember watching my parents watch the news.
Mm-hmm.
My grandma that lived next door to us was like obsessed. She got the newspaper.
Yeah.
She watched the 12 o'clock like noon news and then went into her soap operas. And then she watched the 11 o'clock news at night.
Yeah.
And so when we spent the night at her house, if we were good, she would let us stay up and watch the news with her because like that was a big thing, to stay up late.
Did she stay up so late watching the news? Because this is something that kids have no idea. Did she stay up to watch the national anthem play to let you know TV was done? Remember that?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Game over.
I mean, probably. I just remember, like, I don't think I ever fully made it through the 11 o'clock news.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But, like, Ruby was a night owl. She liked to stay up late and sleep in.
Yeah.
She said, like, I do stuff better at night, which is
Yeah, but that's also like the.
Oh, she was definitely on the spectrum.
Yeah, 1,000%. Because I was gonna say, like,
looking back, she was like.
The reason why you like that is because you get overstimulated during the day because there's too many moving pieces, and you can hyperfixate at night where there's not that many moving pieces. Where for me, I need a lot of moving pieces because if I hyperfixate, I'll kill it. Like I'm that person that is, if you give me a plant, I will overwater that plant. Where for you, if I give you a plant, you'll do everything that you possibly can do other than water the plant. I will
water it the first like 2, maybe 3 days.
Yeah.
And then it's something I see all the time, so it doesn't register.
Yeah.
But at the same token, if I put something away, then I'll forget. Like, I can't put away, like, if I need to take, like, a pill or something. If I put it away, it's out of my mind.
Yeah. Like, if we combine both of our tisms, if you combine both of our tisms,
you got one functioning person.
I wasn't going to say functioning. I was going to say one fucked up. Like, because it's like, because this is the thing. If we were to have a child, it would be a blinger, black ginger, which is basically gingers are black now. I don't know if you guys knew about that, but apparently she's got the affliction for the conviction, which is meow. Really the only affliction that you have is the sun.
Yeah.
Like there's no other thing that really like can like mess you up other than complete and utter daylight. Yeah. Because you are translucent with your whiteness.
Yeah, I burn.
Yeah.
Instantly.
Yeah. I don't. I just get blacker, which the police hate. But like but for the most part, like I've never really been sunburned.
Oh yeah, no. I burn even with 110 SPF on.
My sister has been sunburned before, and I was like, I didn't think that was a thing with us. Like, there's many things that obviously I don't know about. Like, you can quote Vagisil episode 1, but like, I did not think black people got sunburned. I thought it was like for like the Drake blacks, like the light skinned ones. But like, I didn't think like black people got sunburned.
I mean, even if you don't burn, you can still get skin cancer. So you should still wear sunscreen.
I mean, we're all gonna get cancer at some point. The air we breathe. I mean, like, let's be real here. Like, if you think you're getting out of this thing unscathed,
this body already doesn't work.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, it works in certain areas, certain areas.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The Hoover Dam. But like, there's so many things that's just gonna murder us. You know, like, I don't think there's one thing that's in this world that doesn't have an egregious side effect. Yeah. Like, our generation is the generation of what is the most side effects that we can rattle off quickly at the end of the commercial while people are dancing happy and like the most jubilee type of moments is like this and this pill only gives you anal leakage and it's just oh boy, oh man, oh,
it's like lower limb loss, death, anal
leakage, that drip is serious,
and then it's like don't take if you're allergic. Well, how do you know if you're allergic?
Yep. This heart medication only causes minor heart attacks. Like, there's nothing that we have. Like, so we have all this crap about health, whether it be mental health, physical health, emotional health. It doesn't mean shit because the world is just falling apart. I think that's why, like, a lot of people tune into us just for the fact that Ma'am.
See, it's spill proof.
Mm-hmm. So, but it's not wheeze proof.
So it's because you have to really.
You have to really suck on it. Yeah. Do it for the camera. Let's go viral again, Miss Taters.
People agreed with me.
Yeah, as I dropped off Tater Tot. Yeah, but like, I just feel there are so many things. Like, I mean, this is going to be a hard episode to edit. But Like, but there's so many things in terms of mental health, physical health, emotional health that is just bullshit. And like, there's nothing really there to set us up for success. All that's there is like, how do I not die today?
Yeah.
And what won't kill me?
Yeah. And it doesn't help that because of all of the technological advances that are amazing and bring us stuff like podcasts and phones and apps and all that stuff, it also has the downside of you literally see the doom and gloom
all the time,
24/7, whether you want to or not.
Yeah.
And like, because there's even the whole thing of creating the content where it starts out looking like, oh, it's on this topic, and then like after you've watched the first 3 seconds, it's like, now that I have your attention.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, like I wanted you to be a break.
Yeah.
I wanted that coffee recipe. I didn't want to hear the other fucked up thing that people in charge are doing.
Yeah.
And like, it's very much a thing where when we were younger, you knew politicians were bad.
Yeah.
But you didn't know really to what degree.
Yeah.
It was more hush hush.
I will say this as someone who grew up in a very religious household. My mom is a PK, or was a PK. Right now she's RIP, but she was a PK. And then, look, let's be real here. Mom was a PK. Now she's a RIP. But we grew up in a very religious household. We grew up where, you know, the Bible was quoted every single day, right? And
Christian school, K to 12th grade.
And my mom always taught us, her father being a bishop, her brother being a bishop, sister ordained minister, me ordained minister, right? And this, she's always said this. Seek the truth for your, and this was, granted, the woman that everybody said she was on the spectrum because she was dyslexic. This woman said, seek the truth for yourself. You want to know why? I was like, why, Mom? Because she's like, every single last one of these motherfuckers is going to interpret some BS for you to follow them and for you to pay them. There are 2 types of people that you can't trust in this world: preachers and politicians. And that's the God's honest truth. Yeah. Because think about that. If they going to lie to Jesus, you think they ain't going to lie to you?
And I mean, the 2 groups that are always in the news for the scandal, especially child related, is the politicians and the like mega church pastors. Or you hear the story where it was the youth pastor that the second the girl turned 18, they're now dating.
Yeah.
You know, where like, what about the 4 years she was in like the youth church? You know,
yeah.
You just you counted down and waited to.
I mean, it was a clock. It was the ticking time bomb. Because once that clock hit 18, which we know they didn't wait.
Yeah.
We know for a fact they didn't wait. Because let's be serious here. I done seen a lot of things in my life. If you truly believe the interpretation of a word that you can't spell, what type of intelligence level is that? Because, look, my mama said a long time ago, and I've been quoting her a lot, you can't fix stupid. You can fix ugly. You can fix ugly. You can go to a plastic surgeon and get your face fixed. You can fix ugly. Hell, even if you got an ugly type of personality, you can hide it. You can't fix stupid. Stupid is forever. It's God-given, and who are you to go against that? And if you're not stupid, please follow us on all platforms to make sure that we get money, because we tired of being broke. We don't want to start an OnlyFans, but we must if we have to. Oh my God. I mean, we really won't, because somebody has Catholic guilt.
Christian school, not Catholic.
Same thing. You pray to the same Jesus, and he didn't listen.
You have one of my.
This has been another episode of Caffeine Controversy. Pray for me, because my panda bear is over here shedding. I've been your host, Mangina.
Oh my God.
Mendingo Jones, also known as the Big Lush. Big Fluff. And then we have Butt Cheeks, Tiny Feet, Pear Bear, Thick Panda, PGP, Cara. Tune in next week. We're poor. We are.
I know, but like,
look, we gotta step away from a GoFundMe.
not that bad.
No, we're not that bad. This is the thing, we're not even that poor. We just don't want to work our jobs anymore.
We're just burnt the fuck out.
Yeah.
Make sure you follow us on all platforms, you misfits. And just remember, caffeine is first. The filter is never.
Burnt out. Like a hooker on 3rd Ave.
That's sad. Because 3rd Ave is the main Ave of our little shithole.
Shout out to Toothless. We'll be back next week, guys. Oh my God, the bones.